Already. Okay, welcome guys. We have a small group, but that is not necessarily a bad thing. I've taught so many Zoom classes at this point, and I prefer teaching less than, honestly, the smaller the better. So like 2 to 3 kids is awesome. I do a lot of one-to-ones, and then I also did some webinars, which I think I had taught more than like 200 students over the course of the summer. A really basic, almost like a lecture style course, followed by some homework, and kids who are really interested, you have to do a second program. So that's basically what we're going to talk about today. Over the course of the summer, I did a webinar, and as you guys know, something that's very popular is this kind of like concept of the 1% rule. So I would say that if you're doing any kind of marketing, I was basically teaching the basics of entrepreneurship. This webinar course would be 8 weeks long, and we met over the course of sometimes it was June to July, then it was July to August. Anyways, the course was so popular that I basically taught it 4 times, and I think there were about 50 kids in each section, so that was like 200 kids. Then I gave students the opportunity to anyone could just show up to the webinar as long as you paid. So it was 8 hours, I think, for $80, and then I made this incubator available, and this was really, really special. I said I was really expecting maybe a really low number of kids. So there were 200 here, and maybe 4. Like that was my projection. I was like, maybe 4 kids will apply, and then I can accept 3, and then we're gonna have a wonderful program. As it turns out, I think it was more like 15 kids applied, and I took around 8 or 9. And so I think Maya was there at pitch night. It was like a smashing success, really, really cool. It turns out that a lot of the students that I worked with were Asian American, because I basically marketed this program exclusively through WeChat. And I had one girl from Chicago, Ava, who was not Asian, and she was sort of like diversity. That's definitely something I need to work on, and I want to reach out to different schools and different students actually from across the world, because even over the course of the webinar, I mean, these students were from 30 or 40 different states. I had students from America, obviously, but also Canada and Korea and China. So it was mainly in that area, but I'm hoping to hit multiple countries next summer. That would be really, really sweet. And I think it's a challenge with Zoom, but it's also an opportunity to, we get to see each other at the same time. So this incubator program was also 8 weeks, but this one was way more intense. Instead of meeting every week, we met almost every day. There were daily assignments, and I tried to leverage this positive peer pressure, get kids posting online. But yeah, I'll walk you guys through the details, because I think it's in some of these slides. So
Kevin, quick question. So you said that there are 4 sessions with 50 students each?
Yeah, so the way it works was I taught the first 8-week class, and it was so popular that some people didn't register on time, and they were mad. They were like, when are you teaching this class again? I was like, okay, fine, I guess I'll just teach it again in 2 weeks. So then I staggered it, and I taught another 8-week session, like 2 weeks after the first one. And then I did that again. So yeah, that was a lot. I was really, really tired. So this was maybe like after 2 weeks or 4 weeks. And so what ended up happening was, like, by this time, some of the kids who were taking this program really, really enjoyed it, and then recommended that other friends or parents sign up for the course too. And so I taught this all the way until when like school was beginning. This was also a very interesting realization as well, because I had thought that kids want live class feedback. But it turns out in this lecture style class, parents were willing to pay me just for a recording. Like, I was really, really surprised about that. To them, there was actually not much of a difference between you guys being here on Zoom, literally like right now, versus me screen recording this, talking about it, and then sharing with you later. So that was really interesting. Does that answer your question, Yumi? Oh, you're on mute, Yumi. Okay, I hope that answered your question. All right, let's continue. So what
it did. It totally did. Sorry about it. Thank you so much.
No worries. Okay, so I formed this LLC according to my accountant. It was really not worth it until I started making above like $35,000. As soon as I hit the $35,000 mark, I was like, let's do this. Let's save some money. And so I've incorporated as an LLC. And, naturally, I was really excited about it. I was bragging to my mom and my dad, who were very skeptical, always in the other room, always skeptical of my business ideas, which is a good thing. I need someone to really like tone me down. Otherwise, I get too hype, too outrageous. So my mom was like, you shouldn't be so concerned about profitability. What you should really be thinking about, first of all, is scale. And second of all, is consistency. And we'll talk about LTV, lifetime value of customers, and all that good stuff in a little bit. But basically, my mom was like, you want to make sure that your students stay around for years. So that was a really good question that I wanted to investigate. How can I build this kind of, it's very GCI-esque, guys. It is like, I am a thief. Like, I mean, just unabashedly just stolen from you guys. And I was like, all right, this is what works. Here's what I like. Here's what I'm shooting for. Global reach, engagement, empowerment. I was like, it was crazy. So thank you guys for providing me with a blueprint. All right. Okay. Now I'm going to talk about all right. So ZenEd is really funny because I would say that, oh no, go back. Basically, I organized 3 programs. The first was entrepreneurship. We had the 8-week webinar. And you guys have to just imagine this as like casting a really, really wide net. And this is actually kind of interesting for GCI too, because like maybe you guys could do these free webinars for students so they can see what it's like and be able to talk to ambassadors. And then there was like the true program, which is application based. Also 8 weeks, but way more intense. And then on the other side, oh my gosh, I taught writing. Writing was insanely lucrative. And also the kids will stay for years. And I used to be like a really bad writer. I went to Exeter and I was one of the worst writers in my class. And as it turns out, because I was so bad and I slowly got better, like I remember what it's like to just like absolutely suck at writing and not understand anything. And so I went from being one of the worst writers in the school and started winning writing awards, I think, during my junior year. And so I was also really bad at science. So I would like tutor other kids in the dorm in writing, and then they would pay me back, and not pay me back, but they would, also tutor me in biology and all that good stuff. Oh, thanks, Ed. That's some breakfast. Okay, so as it turns out, writing was probably like over 80% of my revenue, and then just entrepreneurship was less than 20%. Also a very common kind of ratio with like the 80-20 rule. So this I just used to almost like support my dream. Like I love teaching entrepreneurship. That's the #1 thing that I'm really most passionate about. But everyone just kept asking about writing so often that as it turns out, there's just such an insane need because you have all these really smart Asian American parents and they can teach their kids math and science, but they just can't teach them writing. And they're looking for another, basically like a familiar face or someone who's qualified, who really likes writing. And so I started doing it. And the really amazing part was when some of my kids went from being also some of the worst writers in their class to winning writing awards over the course of a year. So that was a crazy transformation. As soon as I had that kind of like social proof, it was really easy to retain customers. And that's how like my business kind of grew organically and spread. And writing, after about a year, I can transform you from probably being in the bottom half of your class in writing to winning writing awards. Now that's really hard to say if you're doing math. And you think about it, like the math market for kids is really saturated as well. If you're competing in like things like math counts, it's really, really going to be so difficult to be one of the like bottom half in your class to winning math awards in a year. But for some reason within writing, it's just not, I don't know, maybe schools also don't teach writing as much as they think, like as much as I thought, excuse me. So we had this case where I was like, how many essays are you guys writing a year as high schoolers? And they're like, we wrote 3 essays this whole year. I was like, you guys wrote 3 essays. At Exeter, we write like 3 or 4 essays per semester. And we'd get like really detailed feedback on it. So I was really surprised about that. Okay. All right. Now this is really the heart of what I wanted to talk about. So what I'm going to do today is I'll talk a little bit about the Incubator Program. I know I've been kind of rambling a little bit. I'm a little jittery from the coffee. Excuse me. So we'll talk about the Incubator Program. And then I will share with you guys basically snippets from the 8-week webinar. I'm going to teach you guys, teach you guys the most important concepts that I think my kids really took away from the program. Like this is it. If you understand these 3 things, you could start little businesses, little nonprofits, and that's exactly what my kids did. So here is one of the most the biggest frustrations and pain points that I had, which was that when I joined startup competitions, incubators at Yale, they were just not very strong. Like we did 2 accelerators, and I think we didn't really learn all that much from them. Like there was just so much missing from the curriculum. Even Y Combinator, which is the nation's or the world's #1 accelerator, doesn't have a phenomenal track record. As you guys know, probably have heard, right? Like 1 out of 10 businesses succeed. So 9 out of 10 fail. If you wait another year, another 90% of those businesses die. So really your odds are insanely low. That was a question that just bugged me all the time. I was like, well, GCI is pretty successful. Like I think a lot of the kids there start local service projects and they're quite, this definitely the rate is higher than 1 out of 10. So there's definitely a way to improve the rate. But this was a question, my what if question. And I'm teleported back to 3 or 4 years ago when I went to a GCI event. I think it was a summit at Harvard, and I forgot his name, but he played piano, this old dude with wild white hair. And he talked about the world of possibility versus the world of you mean
Ben Sander.
Yes.
Ben Sander.
So I was really hooked on these. I think a lot of exciting opportunities just come if you ask the right question. And this is the opportunistic, the what if question. So what if there was a way to ensure 100% success rate? What if I taught it to high schoolers? And what if this could all be done virtually, right? I haven't met any of my students in real life, obviously. So these were big, fat what if questions. I was like, probably unlikely, but we'll try. And so it's kind of one of those things where I was like, I'm going to shoot for 100% success rate. And if I get 60 or 80, I'll be super duper happy. Okay. So let's take a look. As it turns out, we had 9 students and 8 out of the 9 projects were successes. And I'm defining success as they literally charged money, or they had sales. They had students, they had clients, and they taught other people. It was really, really phenomenal. So we had Sophia from Exeter. We started a program called the Psych Lab or Psych Lab. And she recruited about 5 or 6 students from China and would guide them through psychology experiments. They would meet over Zoom every week, and she would record videos on YouTube and share them with her. The kids also paid her. Although it's really not, it's not about the money. It's more just the kids, when they pay, they actually show up. That's another funny thing. If they don't pay, they stop showing up. So you want them to have a little skin in the game. That really, really helps. And it also just convinces you, it convinces the parent, it convinces the entrepreneur, it convinces the students that the project is real. Then you had Eric's EduMit. I think this was the most profitable little side business. I think Eric made about $2,000. Basically, he started a consulting agency out of his New Jersey bedroom, right? He had just gotten into Exeter, and he taught all these middle schoolers were asking him questions. How did you apply this, and that? And so, Eric also started off with a really significant pain point. He was like, I would fight with my mom. We would literally be shouting at each other. And then I wrote a 500-word angry email, and I sent it to her later that night because we were so confused and just fed up with this application process. Neither of us really understood it. And so he's like, I want to solve that problem for a lot of other kids. And he created a workshop. He did the same style. He literally started with a webinar and then ended up doing an application-based program. So this has been it's so funny to see how many of my students end up, it's very trickle down, right? I took stuff from GCI and then applied it here, and then they're taking stuff from me. I would say out of the 9 programs, I want to say more than half were education based. Eric is teaching how to apply. Sophia is teaching about psychology. Alex, who's from Arizona, so Sophia and Eric are both Exonians. Alex goes to a not great public school in Chandler, which is a suburb of Phoenix, Arizona. And he's just so infatuated with design. And so he likes biology as well. And so he was teaching kids how to design biological molecules through this program called 360, I forgot the name, 360 something. That's where the 36 comes from. So again, he just had like 5 students. He started with 4 students actually, and one of his students loved it so much he recruited his little brother to join. And so I think Alex charged like $40 or $50, and it was like 10 hours of material. And so this was really, really surprising to me. Like I was flabbergasted, just like jaw on the floor, just dragging my jaw around. It was crazy. And what is the secret? How did I get them to actually execute? First, there's a lot of little tips. So I knew that they wanted to have sales and actual students by the end of 8 weeks. So I moved up their timeline. I knew that this is really, really hard. So I told them that they needed to have sales after 4 weeks. And my prediction was right. So it ended up, they would get students around the 5 or 6 week mark, and everyone was really happy. Everyone was really happy. This was like really, truly everything. I was like, guys, you need to be selling every single day. Like they were really surprised when I said 80% of your work is going to be on the phone, sending emails. It's going to be scheduling interviews with your clients and trying to convert them into paying customers. This was like a pretty radical idea for a lot of youngsters, and honestly, a pretty radical idea for most entrepreneurs and most startups. I think a lot of them, one of the most common reasons for startup death is that they prioritize building the product over the sales. Guys, no startup has ever gone out of business because they were like, oh, our product is so bad. No, they died because they didn't have customers. So I learned this the hard way. I learned this the very, very hard way with my first venture. We had no sales for a long time, and it literally killed our business. So I was determined not to let that happen again to me or to my students. Now, what's really interesting is the consistency. We had large group sessions. We would meet Friday nights with the entire group. And then we had something called patrol meetings, like very similar to GCI again. And this is where I split the 9 kids into groups of 3. And so we would meet once a week in our patrol meetings as well. And we'd have more targeted assignments. Like now, this week, you're going to share insights from your customer interviews. This week, you guys are going to talk about sales techniques. This week, you guys are going to talk about developing your curriculum, all that kind of stuff, or sharing your pitch. But then by far the most useful, the kids said, was just one-on-ones. Meeting one-on-one every single week, I think was a game changer for them. So they met 3 times a week over Zoom. And then the patrol meetings were interesting too, because halfway through the program, I shuffled up the patrol meeting groups. So all the kids knew each other. Like these days I post YouTube interviews with my kids, and they're so supportive. They're like, oh, we can't wait to watch Ava's interview. We can't wait to see Livia's interview. I bet Oscar has a ton to say. And they're really, really supportive. And I also recorded those interviews just so now people who apply to future generations of the incubator can see what those kids have worked on as well. Now, I would say, so these first 2 things were helpful, but not as helpful. They were like so helpful, these first 2. This was really helpful. And then posting on Tribe every day. Oh man, that was good. That was smart. Yeah, well done, Kevin. That was genius. Okay, let me show you guys what I mean. So, exit out of Canva. All right, so see, here is Tribe. And basically every single day, and I would bother the kids and ping them and text them if they forgot to post. And they just share what they worked on. You don't need to write that long, like Oscar wrote a lot, but you can just write a short paragraph. And so when the other kids are doing it, you get a notification and you can see exactly what's being worked on. And I'll tell them if they are on the wrong track. I'm like, okay, stop spending 5 hours designing your website and please pick up the phone and call people, because that is like a higher priority at this moment. And so this is also a way for me to keep tabs on them. And they did this every single day for 60 days. And it was pretty mind-blowing. By day, some of the kids who were working fast, I mean, they had customers by day 20, less than day 20. I think some of them who had a harder time, more like day 30 or 40. But I was really surprised about that. Once they had customers, that's game over. It's GG. It becomes like so real. And they're determined to follow through with the project because someone has paid them. They have skin in the game. At that point in time, I can just sit back and guide them. But it was really, really exciting just to see. I mean, they also use the platform to kind of engage. Again, Kevin, unabashedly stealing from GCI. This is like my free version of HiveBright. So this is around the time when Claire was talking about using a virtual platform. I was like, that sounds like a good idea. Let's see what I can do. You guys have any questions so far? I've been talking a lot. Please interrupt if you have questions.
Kevin, I have a question about the product, the thing that you said about how startups fail because they don't have enough customers. What's the relationship between the product being good enough though, where it would attract the customer? Or do you think that often customers are 40% interested in the product? I mean, just what's the balance there?
Okay, great question. Oh my gosh. I'm going to go on a little tangent, but it's so important. Now, a lot of people are like, how do we know if our product is any good, right? You guys will have, and this is again, I learned so much just on YouTube. There is a series called Startup School, and it's taught by Incubator. And in this lecture, Michael Seibel, who founded Twitch and a lot of other great startups, talked about this relationship between engineering and art. When you are building a product, especially like a lot of the tech side product development people, they kind of are in their cave and they're thinking about like, I want to build something that is like really valuable to me, that I like, and they get in this kind of artist trap. But you are not an artist, you're an engineer. Your product has to solve problems. I mean, how do you know if a product is good? You only know if a product is good based on how people react to it. Like, does that make sense? Like whether or not your product is good is actually just a function of like how many customers you talk to about the product and whether you can show them live demos of the product. Like you would be surprised. You might think, I'll give you an example. Like you might think a product is really, really bad because it's just technically inept. So first version of Home Cook that I created was a Google form and Venmo. This is a bad product, like quote unquote, a bad product. But does it do the job and does it solve problems? Yeah, it did. And so this gave me the confidence to know that my product was good enough to kind of go ahead. The same thing can be said about like a lot of the kids' little initiatives as well. Like for Eric, his product was actually just a webinar, like a 30-minute webinar where he talked a little bit. And it turns out that like 50 people showed up. Like there was demand, people liked it. He had them rate the webinar at the end. And now he had the go ahead and the confidence to know that he could do something else. Now, like what he shouldn't do is spend a ton of time tinkering with the specifics of the PowerPoint and trying to figure out like the design or things like that. That really doesn't matter at the beginning stages. What matters is just, does this product deliver value to my customers? And it's really funny too, because this is a very chicken and an egg problem. You only know what to build in your product by talking to customers. Like I would always start off by talking to the customers, then you build your product, then you show them minimum viable products, like a mini version of your product, then you collect feedback, and it's this constant cycle. But if I were to weight it, like this talking to customers part you should be spending like 90%, no, I shouldn't say 90, but like at least 70% of your energy here. And maybe just like 20 or 30% building the product. Your job is to just incorporate feedback as quickly as you can and get it back to the user and determine if it's giving them value. And then you'll know if your product has succeeded once people start telling other people about it without you having to say anything. Does that answer the question? I don't think that was
very helpful. Thank you.
Oh, okay, great. Oh no, did I just exit out? Oops. All right, let me pull it back up. Oh, here it is. Okay, cool. I'm gonna have to breeze through some of the last slides. I don't have too many slides though, so it's chill. Let's see. Oops. Really, really great.
What platform are you using for this presentation?
I use Canva, C-A-N-V-A.
Okay, cool.
Great company. Also just, I think, went public. Or did it go public? They had some kind of big thing. But I've been using Canva for years now, and it used to be pretty bad. But they've improved it so much. Like I just remember back in the day where I used to design on Microsoft Word, and we use like Word Art or Google Slides, and that was our entire scheme. And now I've taught my students to use Canva, and they really, really love it as well. You can design anything from like Facebook marketing, Instagram, Snapchat stories, to YouTube thumbnails, to presentations. If this will load, sorry about that.
Kevin, I had a question.
Yes, question.
Yeah. So how do you how do you first, so like this is kind of related to what Claire asked, but like how do you first identify if an idea is monetizable in your own head, right? Because I mean, like, one, I'm just like scared of the idea of entrepreneurship because I don't like rejection. So I don't want to put myself in a situation that has not been tried and tested, that when I know that I won't face failure if I follow a certain path. So that's like the first
Yeah.
thing that's scary about entrepreneurship, which is why I'm very much like a safe zone kind of person. I would not risk stuff. But how do I first, like, if like I have like so many ideas, but I don't know if any of them are monetizable, or if stuff already has a customer base, or like there are people willing to pay for a product like this, and like how do you kind of figure that out?
That's a really remarkable question as well. Thank you for that question. Um, well, the first thing is, I'll split this question up into two parts. One is kind of like the more philosophical, strategic view of entrepreneurship. And then the second, we'll talk about risk. And then the second is more like the nitty gritty tactics. So the first off, a lot of people think that entrepreneurship is about risk taking, identifying an opportunity, you're jumping into the unknown. I think that's fine, but I want to kind of change your guys' perspective. And this was a major paradigm shift for me. But you can start thinking about entrepreneurship not as risk taking, but as risk minimizing. Every step of the way, your job is to minimize your chances of failure, whether that's at the ideation stage, the marketing stage. That's from Airbnb's Brian Chesky. And so how do you minimize failure? For one, you can take a model that already works and apply it to a different market, right? So you know that Uber and Airbnb works in the US. You could take that idea and apply it to Nigeria, or you could apply it to China. Like, that is a pretty low risk venture. It's just the same thing here. Like, I kind of knew that this web education would work. I actually had been tutoring for several years before I even started my own tutoring business. I tutored for another company for over 1,000 hours, crazy. And once I started my own business, I talked to the old founder, and she let me pull some of those students that I'd been working with for years. It wasn't that many, 3 or 4. And that way it's like, wow, this is really secure, right? Like, this is a proven model. I know it's going to work. I have students. I'm familiar with this space. Now, if we're talking more about like the tactical side, overcoming this fear of rejection and trying to figure out like, is this business going to work? Is it viable? I think something that you have to constantly talk to your customers, and you have these ideas about what could work, whether it could be monetized. There's just 2 main tests to really figure out. And let's take a look at this. This is a natural segue to the customer interview stage. So the first thing that I had the kids do is I wrote a script for them, and then they would talk about, they would ask other people about their program. Okay. I'm just going to talk about the most important questions. All right, so I'm still thinking about pricing for this program. I was wondering, at what cost would this program be so expensive you wouldn't consider it? And at what price is it so cheap that it would look suspicious? This is a great pricing question. You want to figure out, like, are people willing to pay for it, and how much would they be paying for it? You can just graph all the answers, and there ends up being like a little magical square, and that's how you figure out how to price it. Then you can ask people at the end of the interview, you ask them this question, really, really straightforward. Like, thanks so much. I was wondering if you would be willing to sign up right now. Like, would you pull out your wallet and like put a down payment for this idea right now? If they say yes, then obviously you're done. But the best part is when they say no, because 90% of people will say no. And all you have to ask is why not? And this question will blow your mind. I interviewed 75 kids for my webinar, and I think I got like 50 to sign up. And I would ask them, how come you guys don't want to sign up? And they would be like, we'll sign up. We're just not free that day. So I was like, oh, you're telling me if I change the time, you will sign up right now? And they were like, yes. And so I literally just changed the time. It always surprises you the reasons why people wouldn't want to do it. Or they'll say, I want to talk to my parents or this or that. And I'll get the parent on the phone, explain the program, and they'll both be like, well, if my kid wants to do it, like, I'll give them the go ahead. So does that kind of answer your question? You're always trying to figure out like why people are rejecting you, and just slowly shoot down those answers like one by one, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that's it. Oh, so you mentioned customers. So like, how do you identify a customer base? I mean, like, you come in with a certain idea of a customer base, but like, I liked how you were like, okay, I know how the Asian American base thinks, so I'm gonna harness that and kind of use it to my advantage almost, right? And like, I know they want to see a familiar face. I know this is what they struggle with, so I'm gonna put that together to kind of come up with customer base and kind of reach out to that. How would you how do you think that can be translated to other ideas and communities, I guess?
Yeah, that is a really, really good question as well. I think there's have you ever heard of a customer persona, Shaitanya?
No.
No? All right. It's a very, very common tactic that a lot of user experience designers use, customer persona. It's used in design and marketing. It's literally a fictional character that you use to represent what you think is your target user. So let's look, I'll just show you some examples. Like, let's see. And they will literally put like a name and face on this person. And they'll be like, okay, so here is Sarah. And she is this old. Here are her motivations, pain points, background, strategy. You can sit down, you can create this by yourself, show it to like 2 or 3 other people and see if that makes sense. And you basically start off with a hypothesis. Then you start talking to people who are similar to this person. And then you'll slowly start to adapt and try to figure out like, oh, is this truly my customer? Or maybe my customer is someone else. This is a kind of a high level thing. There's a lot of little nitty gritty details, but you can start off with a guess, ask 3 or 4 people, and then see if those people are actually in your target market. And then you can also use it, use referral based techniques. So you call like 3 or 4 of your friends who might be in this target market, but you don't want to call people who are your friends. You do want to talk to total strangers because they're more honest. And then ask for referrals and be like, do you know one other person who you think would be a good customer? And then start kind of branching out towards there. What ends up happening is that the people who you think are your target market might not actually be your target market. Like I had a loose net. I knew I'd be working with Asian American students, but I had a lot of questions. How old are they? What socioeconomic status would I be working with? There were a lot of these kinds of up in the air questions that I really wasn't sure about. And as I was talking to more and more students, then the picture got a little bit more clear. So you start off with this hypothesis and then you get closer to reality, the more people you talk to. But yeah, I mean, you can look up customer persona and there's a lot of education about it online and you can read about it too.
Yeah, no, totally. That's super interesting. I'm definitely looking that up. Even if I'm not doing entrepreneurship, I definitely want to look that up. That sounds
Yeah,
really
I mean, that's for anything, whether it's like you're starting a club, who's like my target audience, right? You might think it's all freshmen, but it's not. You're not just trying to recruit like every single freshman. You're trying to identify like specifically what are their motivations, pain points, etc. Okay, I don't think we'll be able to get to some of these concepts. So I'll just talk about CAC and LT. Oh, was there another question?
I had a quick question. So,
Sydney, yes.
yeah, was this all online based or were you kind of making an adjustment to the pandemic?
Yeah, this was all online based. Yes and no. Good question. Because I had been tutoring online for years before the pandemic, 3 or 4 years. All my students were kind of in the same time zone, but just they would be in Alabama and I would be in New York. So I knew Zoom like before anyone knew Zoom. I knew Zoom in its nascent stage in like 2016 or 2017. And I was like, this program blows. And then it got a lot better. But anyways, I really think that e-learning is the future. I've talked to Claire extensively about this. Like a lot of people don't know this, but you can get a free MIT education online, straight up. If you just look up MIT courses, literally all MIT lectures are available. You just sit down and watch them as a high schooler. Available for free. If you go to MIT, you're straight up just paying for the piece of paper and also the community and the experience. But I mean, all the education is free and online. So I knew that online education would be like a really big thing, a big deal. And it just became like so much more normal. And also parents were scrambling like in the middle of the summer. All of their in-person summer activities just totally fell through and they wanted to keep their kids busy. So that was another pain point. That was another really interesting point, going back to Shaitanya's question, because my customer is not the kid. My customer is actually the parent. That was a pretty big mindset change. Like, how can I convince the parent that this is worth paying for? How can I convince the parent that their kid is growing? So that's, and I mean, wow, once the parents saw that their kids were working on it every single day and their kids executed and they had paying customers, that it was like game over. Like, I think the parents were just started naturally telling other people about it as well. So it's like, under what circumstance, kind of like going back to some of the other concepts and tying it together, under what circumstance would this customer be so excited about the product that they would be willing to tell their friends about it, right? Like, what boxes do I need to check for that to happen? For writing, it was like, once a kid won a writing award, that was game over. Once a kid starts their own little business and they have paying customers, also game over. I knew that once those milestones had been hit, then I could relax. That was kind of a long-winded answer, but back to Sydney's question, yes and no. It is in reaction to the pandemic, and also it was an opportunity I had identified a while ago.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, one day I hope to have students from all over the world and do Zoom sessions with kids from several continents, and I really think it's possible. Okay, the one thing that I guess one of the final entrepreneurial concepts that I'll talk about, the other ones are kind of basic, but this is a really mind-blowing concept that I learned at the Yale business school, and then I basically simplified it and said, what if I could teach kids the same concept but on a smaller level? And that's in a way also similar to what I'm thinking. It is an MBA program designed for middle schoolers. That's kind of what I'm trying to do. And I was like, well, who doesn't want to sign up for that? I would sign up for that. That sounds awesome. So I was like, let's take a look. These are not, guys, this is not rocket science. This is not neuroscience. This is not brain surgery. This is super simple. But basically, you take a look at Starbucks and you wonder what makes a business like Starbucks so sensational. It's really surprising. Can you guys see my screen? Yeah, okay. So you have this concept called CAC, which stands for Customer Acquisition Cost. Can I draw? Yeah. Customer acquisition cost. In large companies, customer acquisition cost is really, really high. And the reason it's so high for a company like Starbucks is because they've exhausted traditional marketing methods. They've done email marketing, they've done the phone, and now the main way they reach people is they need these large number of impressions, billboards, television ads. That's why cost of customer acquisition is so high. And yet they can justify this advertising money that they spend because their LTV is so high. It's crazy. LTV is your lifetime value of the customer. Okay, so again, not a crazy concept to understand. How much does this customer spend on Starbucks over the course of their entire life? Now, this was a really surprising answer to figure out. And there's a lot of different ways to calculate it. If you guys are more interested, I'm not a genius. I literally took this from Google. You can just look up Starbucks LTV. And there's different ways to calculate it. But the basic gist is okay, how much do these people spend per week times how often do they visit? And yeah, you end up realizing a lot of things. Starbucks core target market, they really hook you when you're in middle school or high school. There's a lot of sugar, caffeine in the drinks. And then colleges, Starbucks is all over college campuses. They've infested college campuses, and then they hook you there. And then companies like Starbucks and McDonald's are really more like real estate companies than true food and business companies, because they're trying to get that Starbucks across the street from the subway station. So it becomes a habit where true Starbucks customers go there 4 or 5 times a week before work when they're in a rush, and then they go and leave. And so people stay Starbucks customers on average 20, 30 years. By the time they're in their 40s or 50s, they get more health conscious and they kind of drop the sugar and caffeine. But it's a wild number. Now, you guys don't need to know all the specifics, but here's how I modified it and taught it to students. I was like, obviously, you guys are not spending $1,000 to acquire a customer. Your LTV is also not $20,000. That's crazy. So what I tell the kids is just think about, you're going to apply the same exact concept, but because you guys are all broke and poor, we're gonna calculate CAC and we're gonna calculate LTV in number of minutes or number of hours. And I mean, if you really want to get specific, you can just value your hour at minimum wage and say it's $7 or $8. All right, but let's just pretend I started a new initiative, and then let's call this initiative seniors versus seniors. Okay, so it's seniors in high school, and they play board games against seniors in nursing homes or retirement homes. This could be all virtual again too, right? I could set up a Zoom call and they could play Catan or Monopoly against each other. Everyone's happy. So the way I calculate this is, all right, let's see how long it takes me to convince one high school senior to sign up. As it turns out, let's say I make 4 calls in 1 hour. In 1 hour, I get 2 signups, right? So a 50% conversion rate. All right, that is so simple, right? We love this math. So it takes 30 minutes to acquire 1 customer. So far, so good. Now, the next question is, once this customer has been acquired, how long do they continue volunteering for my program? That's the real money question. So the question, so it's really simple. Like this one senior stays for, let's say on average, they stay for 6 weeks and they volunteer 1 hour a week. Boom, you are cooking, right? So if we do the math, we have an LTV of 6 hours. And it took you 30 minutes to acquire them. So again, what's really important is this ratio. So I have a 1 to 12 ratio. And the kids seeing this, they're like, oh, I could do this. Like, this is totally possible. And again, I'm like, how can you guys increase your LTV? Can you teach the course again? Can you increase the number of hours, right? Or how do you minimize this? How do you make your funnel more optimized and reduce the amount of time it takes you to convince one person? How do you increase your conversion rate? So this kind of thinking just lends itself to a lot of great questions, thinking business-wise. Does this make sense to everyone? I think it's pretty like straightforward to follow. And it's really exciting. I think a lot of the kids, like when they see something like this, it really opens their mind. And again, this is not like a crazy concept. This is a really straightforward little concept. But I think I did the smart thing and kind of manipulated it into talking about time. So, I mean, you'll be surprised. Like they all know what LTV is. If you ask any of my kids, they all know what it is. They all know what CAC is. And they can even like calculate it and think about like, you know, now that my program's over, can I still engage my customer? How can I get them to stick around for another year? Like they start asking those kinds of questions. And again, guys, the reason I teach this is because I have seen just catastrophic failures. Like I have seen kids at Yale not understand this. And I have seen their business blow up in their face, straight up. Like these are the smartest kids at the university. By the way, they had to apply for the incubator, right? So they like, this is this like a subgroup of Yale entrepreneurs. And they could not figure this out. And they would spend abundantly on acquisition costs without understanding LTV. And that's how your business dies. It is really that simple. If your ratio is smaller, then your business will go bust. And I saw this happen to friends. Like I can't even explain it. Like it was so mind blowing to see it in real life. So I was like, please, my students, you have to make sure it's at least a 1-to-1 ratio. Even better if it's 4-to-1, 8-to-1, 12-to-1. Starbucks is like 18-to-1. I think I can find the little Starbucks case. Starbucks LTV. It's a phenomenal like little review. Calculating lifetime value of a customer. Boom, here it is. Really, really good. Literally the first thing if you Google Starbucks LTV. And the interesting thing is there's different ways to calculate it. And you can figure out like which makes the most sense for you. I mean, like guys, everything is on the internet for free these days. Like I learned more from YouTube than I did from Yale over the last 9 months. Mind blowing. Like I learned how to trade options and stocks, learned about personal finance and businesses. Really, really insane. I watched like all of Kathy Wood's like investment market updates. Like it's ridiculous. Everything is online. All right. I'm not going to cover that. Whatever. Okay. So yeah, my newest initiative is I started a YouTube channel. I felt guilty that I was only helping rich kids get farther ahead. So I have this crazy pipe dream, which is kind of maybe, you know, they say you shouldn't tell people your goals, right? Because then it like lowers your chance of whatever. But I have this like strange, it's kind of like egotistical, but like I really want to be like one of the best teachers in the world. Like I read books about teaching, about becoming a better communicator. And so if I can get really, really good at teaching, that's like another thing about how you can justify like your pricing. If you are, how can you have to think like, how can I get in the top 1% of my field? And so you'd be surprised, but I even asked that to my students and they're always like refining their skills and thinking about like what they can do to become a better debate teacher. Like what uniquely qualifies them? What makes them better than a traditional debate coach? And they'll be like, oh, I just learned this. I'm more approachable. I understand the kids' perspective better. And it's really interesting because I'll teach high schoolers and then those high schoolers will teach middle and elementary schoolers. And it's just like a really beautiful cascading effect. But like I said, I don't want to just like tutor rich kids for the rest of my life. I don't think that is just like a noble goal. And there's some things that I think justify an application. And if you're serious, then yeah, like you should do the incubator. It's really hard to teach someone an incubator, quote, or give them an incubator-like experience just purely through YouTube videos. So there will be a blend of some things which are personal and some things which can just be a lecture. But yeah, okay, great. We're a little just finished just under time. Do you guys have any more questions? I've been loving the questions so far because that's really, really smart questions. But anything about the experience or more entrepreneurial tactics, I'd be happy to discuss.
Just really fascinated by how we can apply this idea of CAC and LTV to everything that we do, basically, because it's like in economics, it's like kind of a cost benefit analysis, right? And like as an economics major, my mind is just working there. I'm just wondering, so like say your incubator program is 8 weeks, and like this is all you have designed up till now, you don't really have you don't really have an idea of like how you're going to retain those customers past those 8 weeks, or if you can even do that. So how would you, because like not all ideas are like lifetime values. I mean, like Starbucks of course is going to have a longer term concept, a longer term attachment to it.
Yeah.
How do you figure out if I'm going to only do this over the summer, or if this is like a one-time thing that people can do? How do you then balance that cost benefit analysis?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, you can do something super duper similar. Like I think the example that I shared with seniors versus seniors, that could just be a one summer thing, right? And if it takes you 30 minutes to convince one senior to sign up, but they show up for 8 weeks, let's say they miss a few weeks. So they show up 6 weeks, an hour each time, then you've defined your range. This is still, all of this is happening over the course of one summer. In fact, you could do the same thing for one day, right? Like I had a, excuse me, I had a girl who's organizing a beach cleanup. She's like 9 years old. It takes her like 20 minutes to convince one person to sign up. And then the beach cleanup is like a 4-hour event. So her LTV is still like amazingly high, right? As long as you define your range, obviously like for someone like me, I think about it even wider in scope. So I'm like, okay, I got the kids in this 8-week incubator, but I want to keep them in the Zen Ed kind of community for a long time. And so I give them YouTube videos. I tell them, in fact, a lot of the kids, the way that you guys should think about it, and also why this process works really, really well, is because I tie it back to college admissions. That's what the parents like to hear. So when you start your first initiative, guys, your first initiative is like your first pancake, all right? It's just like, it's not going to be perfect. Sometimes it's even just a throwaway. And that's okay. Like your job is to fail early and fail hard and fail fast. Then a lot of the kids during the interviews on YouTube, I'm like, you guys thinking of another initiative? And then they really are. Your first initiative, like really, really small scope, 4 to 5 kids, 4 to 5 customers, I mean, so 4 to 5 paying customers. And really, you're just trying to build that confidence and convince yourself that you can do it. I think your local service project is also kind of small in this scale. Then by 10th grade, you want to do something a little bit more substantial. So maybe, double digits, 10 to 20 people that you help. It doesn't have to be customers, just 10 to 20 people that you help. By the time you get to 11th grade, you want to create something that's a little bit more substantial. Maybe if you can hit this like 50 or 100 range. And this is where you see this kind of like snowball cascading effect. And it's really remarkable. Sometimes the kids do totally different ideas. So I had one girl start a blog for new and incoming students at Exeter. And then her next initiative, she just totally switched gears and she said, I'm going to organize a hackathon, online hackathon for kids. And her scope has changed as well. But these skills are so applicable. It's basically project-based learning, right? Like product development, marketing, all these things are going to matter. It doesn't matter if you're doing like nonprofit work, startup work. By the time you get to 11th grade, what's really important here, and I do a lot of college admissions work, is that you want to get featured in a local newspaper or a magazine or some kind of outside network. And again, this is all about the social proof. Once the kids have been featured and they have articles written about them, I have a kid who's getting interviewed by like CNBC for his coding camp, virtual coding camp that he started a year ago. It's game over. Like the kid has changed. Not only has the kid, like the parents are happy. It's really easy to get into a top 20 college at this stage because it shows initiative, leadership, growth, everything you want to see in a young person. But the best thing of all is like these kids are totally transformed. Like I'm telling you, I have kids who are so crazy shy. I was like scared if they could do sales, and they still pull sales out of their butt. Like they just make it happen. I obviously give them tools and a lot of other things to help them, but it really changes them. They keep mentioning the same Like I do these interviews and they're not advertisements. I just do them just so I can like have them on my YouTube channel and so that people can look back on them in years. And the kids are just talking about like, they'll say things like, you know, after this experience, I'm always asking myself, like, why should I wait for someone else to build it? I could just build it myself. Like, it's such a crazy shift in mentality. So yes, I hope that helped.
Yeah, it really did. I'm just trying to figure out how I can put this or like translate this idea to my so at university I've joined like a leadership club group program where it's a certificate program, and we kind of like develop and implement ideas like this. So I'm just kind of wondering how I can like kind of apply this or maybe teach the 50 odd kids that are in the program kind of how this works. So it's really interesting. Thank you for this.
Yeah, no problem. Any other questions? It's good stuff. We're basically out of time, but.
I think one last quick question, if I may, Kevin.
Mhm.
How much time do you spend trying? So is your approach to customer acquisition? Because I can imagine, you know, if you look at the whole world, you could just be throwing spaghetti at the wall and wasting a lot of time with a lot of phone calls that don't really get you anywhere. So, or do you try to look at some of the kids that you have and then sort of upsell them? But what's your strategy with how far you go and how wide you go, I suppose, with trying to get customers? Do you work in natural networks or do you use Instagram, Facebook, marketing?
Yeah. I was really just focused on one-to-one phone calls in the beginning. And once I developed like an initial user base of around 50 customers, it became a lot easier to kind of branch out. And I would just stick to one social media platform to start and kind of understand it like really well. And honestly, the platform that I used wasn't really a social media platform. I just used WeChat. And I was really surprised about that. But there's really major WeChat groups. And it like I also wasn't promoting myself. One of the like biggest breaks that I got was I had I think a student, two students that I worked with many years ago, and I would just touch base with them every few months. And around April of this year, they got into Yale, a pair of twins, and so the mom was like super excited and told me about it, and I was I was like, that's amazing. And she was like, how can I thank you? And I was like, oh, actually, there is something you could help me with. I was like, can you post about my webinar in a few WeChat groups? And she just like showered with praise and talked about like how I helped her kids. And that really helped. In terms of like target market segmenting, like if I were applying this to GCI, I still think it would be a really helpful example to sit down and talk to like 50 potential GCI applicants and figure out like what are their hesitations. Are they interested in the program? How interested? Would they sign up? Would they apply today? Why or why not? You can start off with like a base group of 10th graders or 11th graders at high achieving schools, or even you can do a mix of public, private. You can also start off with the existing GCI network and then see if they can recommend like one or two other people who would be good for interviews and kind of start branching out that way. That's kind of what I would do just to figure out like, you know, we have this really amazing program. What are people's hesitations about applying? Is it the cost? Is it the schedule? Is it the education? Is it the brand? And trying to figure out and shoot down again, like all those reasons why someone would not want to sign up, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. This was, I think, extremely helpful for our staff as well.
Okay. I just realized that I have tutoring 4 minutes ago. So I got to head out.
Thank you so much, Kevin. We really appreciate this.
No problem. I hope it was helpful. I'll send the recording. I'll upload it
Thanks,
today and then I'll
Kevin.
send it to you guys.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank
Great
you.
job.
Thanks, Kevin.
No problem. Okay, guys. I'll catch you guys later. Thanks for coming. Bye.